For this bell work, we got a radius of the circle is 12.7 feet. Find the circumference to the nearest tenth. So last time we saw how to find answers in terms of pi as well, but this one we'll just round to the nearest tenth. So the circumference, like we saw last time, can be found by taking 2, multiplying it by the radius, and then multiplying that by pi. And to use the pi, we'll just use the pi button on the calculator. But this one did give us the radius at 12.7 feet. So I replaced the radius with 12.7. And then I just put this in the calculator. So 2 times 12.7 times pi, enter. And the calculator gives me a pretty ugly decimal here, but it'll work. 79.79645534. This one did say it around to the nearest tenth, which is the 7 there. Since the number immediately to its right is 9, 9 is more than 5, or 5 or more. So this means that we'll add 1 to the tenths place value. So I got my 7. We're going to add 1 to that, and this will be my new value. That'll be 8. Of course, everything else just kind of goes away there, so I end up with 79.8. And then the last thing I'll do here is just label this in feet. So I end with 79.8 feet. Here's our objective. I can find the area of a circle from the radius and diameter. Take 30 seconds and copy this down, please. So last time we talked about the circumference of the circle. This time we're looking at area. So the formula is a little bit different today. And let's look a little bit at our vocabulary for circles. Now you do have a center of a circle, which that's supposed to be kind of a green dot right there. It is the center, but like we've seen, it's not really part of our formulas. And in fact, we're not really going to be using it other than to just know that the center has to do with the radius and the diameter. So the center is the same distance from any edge of the circle. And the distance from the center to the edge of the circle, that's the radius right there. If you went from one end of the circle to the other, but through the center, then you get what we call diameter. Now, that doesn't mean you always have to go through the center, but then it changes the vocabulary. It's a different vocabulary word for circles, which we don't care about. Not that we care about this stuff, but one thing we need to understand, just like we saw last time, is that the radius is half the diameter, meaning if they give you the diameter, which they will, you'll need to take the diameter and divide it by 2 in order to get the radius, which is the only value we're going to be using in today's formula for area. And then, yeah, area is just the surface space taken up by the circle. And it's true that you could split this up into small squares, which is why we label it in square units, whatever the units are. Sometimes it's square meters, sometimes it's square inches. Doesn't really matter what that is. You can show it like this as well. You can say units squared, so inches squared or meters squared or something like that, okay? Now, on the assignment today, the labels are going to be given for you, but in the future, if you are doing this by hand, you'll need to put the labels on yourself. So the worksheet was just, I just typed it in wrong. So it had a 2 right here times pi. Just get rid of that garbage. It was kind of left over from the circumference formula. It's just pi times the radius to the power of 2. Okay, now you'll see on the assignment, sometimes they will ask for the answer in terms of pi. If this is the case, pi has to be part of the answer, which we've seen with circumference. That also means that we're not actually multiplying by pi. If we need the decimal, though, which we will sometimes, because sometimes they'll say, hey, go ahead and round to the 10th. If the assignment says something like round to the nearest 10th, then we need the decimal. Now, to get the decimal, though, like we've seen before, there's one button you can push after you get an answer in terms of pi, which we will see today, in order to change it to a decimal. So if you look right above the enter button, there's a double arrow button, and we'll pretend like my drawing is very good. It's just a double arrow button. If you push this, then it will change the answer from pi, or in terms of pi, to a decimal. Now, along those lines, in the formula, we have this power of 2 stuff right here. And the power of 2, to get a power of 2 on the calculator, power of 2, you're looking for this button. It's just one button to the left of 7, and it's the x squared button, like this. So we're going to be using this button today with this area formula stuff. Okay. Now, just like we saw on that last slide, sometimes they're not going to give us the radius directly, but they will give us the diameter. If they give us the diameter, we're just going to divide it by 2, and that will give us the radius. This is all plug and chug stuff, right, where they're going to give us the radius or the diameter. Remember, we're going to have to divide the diameter by 2 to get the radius. But this is an order of operations things, so make sure that, and I'm just going to be typing this into the calculator directly, so make sure that you do that as well. Try not to do pi times the radius and then push enter and then raise that to the power of 2, because that's out of order, out of the order of operations. As much as we didn't ever want to hear about the order of operations again, there you go. You got to be careful on this stuff. But again, the calculator knows the order of operations, so as long as you type it in, it will do the work for you. Now this example, being very kind to us because it gave us the radius directly. The radius is 13 miles. So, to find the area, which I'm just going to use a, I'm just going to take pi and multiply it. Again, instead of using radius, I now have a value to use, 13. And then don't forget your exponent of 2 right here. That is the exponent 2. But this is something I can type directly into the calculator. Remember, there's the pi button. If you look at the top left of your calculator, there's the second button. 3 buttons down from there is the pi button. So I type in pi. I'm going to put the radius in parentheses. So I'm going to push parentheses, 13, and then close the parentheses, and then raise this to the power of 2. And in fact, I even put the multiply between these, just like it shows right there, okay? So I got pi times parentheses 13, close parentheses to the power of 2. I push enter, and my calculator says that the area is 169 pi. And that's okay, because this answer right here is already in terms of pi. It's not rounded to the nearest tenth, and we did want one answer in terms of pi, so this would be one of the answers. Now, by the way, on the assignment, it's not going to ask for both, from what I remember. It's only going to ask for one or the other, so I'm doing both every time, just so that you can see how to do either one. And yes, I will not forget the label here. This one I'm going to label in square miles. And yeah, if you did miles squared, that would be funny too. But I'm not going to do it on this one. But it did say to round to the nearest tenth as well, so let's go and do that. So right above the enter button, okay, right above the enter button is this double arrow button. So I just push it. I don't have to push anything else right now on my calculator. I just push this double arrow button, and it gives me the decimal 530 point, and it gives me a pretty ugly decimal, 929,158.5. But it did say to round to the nearest tenth, so that is what I will do. So I look at the 9 here in the tenths place value. I look immediately to its right, which is a 2, and 2 is less than 5. So what this means is that the 9 stays the same. But this also means that everything else we can get rid of. But my final answer rounded to the nearest tenth would be 530.9. And once again, I will label this in square miles. That's it. That's, again, you should only need one or the other on the assignment. So you have to pay attention to which one it is asking for. But now we know how to find either one, okay? The power of 2, so yeah, I forgot to mention this when I was doing this one. but the power of 2 here is using the x to the power of 2 button, which is just one button to the left of 7. So just to see the button progression on this one, I actually typed the button pi, and then I multiply it. I use the multiplication button, and then I type in the radius, which was given to us as 13. I guess I did put parentheses around it, but you could use 13 if you want. I am recommending using parentheses because when we start using fractions, which we will, then you're going to need those parentheses, okay? But you could have just typed in 13 for this one. I'm taking a little bit of a shortcut. That's kind of the beauty of these problems is as long as you have the formula, it's just plug and chug. That's what it's called, because you're just plugging in 13 and then you're letting the calculator chug away and it gives you the answers. You just have to know what buttons to push. On now, and so you'll see on the assignment like the last problem where they give you the radius. This one though is giving us a diameter. But we see in the formula that it only wants radius for us, so we got to figure out what the radius is. It's not like it's hard. So the radius for us is where I'm going to have to take the diameter that they've given us and divide it by 2. You'll notice that I have this in fraction form. That's because if it's in fraction form, then the calculator will return the answer in terms of pi. So the diameter, right? It's 5 inches. So I'm going to replace the diameter here with 5. It's just, again, I'm using the fraction button, the N over D button on the calculator. It gives me back 5 over 2. If you get 2.5, it's still correct, but you may kind of struggle getting the answer in terms of pi. So right now the radius for us is 5/2 inches, and that's good. Okay, so I take my area formula, which is pi, and then I'll multiply this by the radius, but I now know the radius is 5/2. And now that I'm using a fraction, I am going to use parentheses around the fraction before I raise it to the power of 2. And remember, the power of 2, you'll have to use that, to get the power of 2 here, you're going to have to use that x squared button, one button to the left of 7. So I type this in, pi times parentheses, and I'm using the N over D button to get 5 over 2, close parentheses, and then I push the x squared button, and I push enter. On my calculator, it shows me 25 pi over 4. And this is okay. This right here is our answer in terms of pi. Of course, I will have this in square inches, but I'll show it in inches squared. It's the same thing. It's just, again, it's important for us to understand that this is the answer, what they say in terms of pi. So again, pi is part of the answer. We didn't actually end up multiplying by pi. It's in the answer. That's what we want to see. As it turns out, this is what we call the exact answer. And then when we find the answer rounded to the nearest tenth, that is our approximated answer. So in my calculator, it's already showing 25 pi over 4. I just push the double arrow button. And it changes this for me to the nearest, well, at least the decimal form. So I got 19.634, 954.08. That's as far as it goes on my calculator. It would go on forever, by the way. But we don't want to see that many decimal places, if we even want to see any. In any case, so I'm looking at the 6 in the tenths place right here. And immediately to its right is a 3. Well, 3 is less than 5. So that means the 6 in the tenths place value stays the same. All right, so just to simplify this, it just ends up being 19.6. I'll still label it though. It still is in inches squared. So 19.6 inches squared. And there's my two answers. This is the approximation to the nearest tenth. 25 pi over 4 is inches squared is the answer in terms of pi. But remember, on the assignment, it's only going to ask for one or the other. You just got to pay attention to which one, because in the last class, students were putting in the decimal when it asked for in terms of pi. Or it would ask for the decimal in the nearest tenth, but they would put the pi answer. Now, if you're wondering how to put the pi into the answer, just like we saw in the last assignment, there is a pi button on the computer for the assignment. You type in 25 and then push this button and then divide it by 4. So this one, the diameter of a circle. This one is the diameter, not the radius, but the diameter is 14 feet. We're going to round this to the nearest tenth in terms of pi. You guys try this one out. Try it out. This one gives us the diameter, but we do want the radius. So that's what we got to find on this one. We want the radius, not the diameter, but we will use the diameter to find the radius. We're going to take the diameter and divide it by 2. Now I'm still going to use the n over d button here, even though it's going to be a whole number in the end, because the diameter is 14. 14 divided by 2. Put this in the calculator. Use the n over d button, use the divide button. It's not going to matter. It's going to tell you the radius here is 7 feet. Okay, so we have 7 feet for our radius. This will help us to find our area, which is going to be pi, and then I'll multiply that by the radius, which we now know is 7 feet. So again, I'm going to put the 7 in parentheses just to be careful, I guess, even though I wouldn't necessarily need to because it's not a fraction. If it is a fraction, then that's when you would want the parentheses. When I put this into the calculator, it will give me the answer in terms of pi. It tells me the answer is 49 pi. Now, just to be clear, this is in square feet. And I'll try to be more clear here. This is the answer in terms of pi. Okay? So if the assignment asked for the answer in terms of pi, this is all you would need. You'd type in 49 pi. If it did ask for the answer and to the nearest tenth, then, so we take that 49 pi. Again, I'm just pushing the double arrow button above the enter button, and the answer shows me as 153.93804. Not very many decimals, but there's plenty. What we really want, though, is this answer rounded to the nearest tenth. So I see the 9 here in the tenths place value. Immediately to its right is a 3. The 3 in the hundredths place value is less than 5. Less than 5, which tells us that the 9 stays the same. So the 9, yeah, it's just going to stay a 9. And we end up with 153.9. And again, I'll label this in square feet. So there's our 2 answers. That's all we need. We have the answer in terms of pi. That was 49 pi square feet. Or the answer rounded to the nearest tenth, 153.9 square feet. Now, there was still some confusion in the last class about where this decimal came from. It really is just taking 49 and multiplying it by the value of pi. And then, again, we've just rounded it, but we rounded it to 153.9. It's going to work the same, but we're looking at diameter. That's what it starts us out with. So what do we do when we give them the diameter first? We just want to find the radius. That's what we really want. So we're going to have to take that diameter and divide it by 2. Now this diameter, again, I'm using the n over d button for this, but the diameter says it's 12. Even the n over d button is going to give me this as a whole number, which is 6. So I end up with 6 meters being my radius. And that means I can go to my formula and I can replace the radius with 6. So the area is pi times 6, which I'll put in parentheses again, to the power of 2. When I do this in the calculator, it will give me the answer in terms of pi, which is showing me as 36 pi. And like I said, I'll label this in square meters or meters squared like this. But it is important for us to understand this is the answer in terms of pi. So that's the first one that we want. But I'm going to change this into a decimal. I'm just pushing the double arrow button immediately above the enter button. And it gives me this decimal. Pretty ugly. 113.0973355. Well, we only want to round this to the nearest tenth, and we are rounding it, but we don't need all these decimals, okay? So on this one, I see I've got a 9. in the hundredths place value, the 9, is 5 or more. This means that the 0 in tenths, we're going to add 1 to the tenths place value. So that's what I will do. I'm going to take my tenths place value, add 1, which will just be, well, 0.1. So I end up with 113.1, but again, we are looking at meters squared. Well, with this then, we now have the answer rounded to the nearest tenth, and we also have the answer in terms of pi. I'll just stress this again. On the assignment, it will not ask for both, usually. It will only ask for one. You have to be careful which one it's asking for so that you know which one it wants. Also, the diameter. If it gives you the diameter, make sure you divide that by 2 to get your radius. If it gives you the radius, there's no need to divide by 2, like we saw in the first example. Now there's our objective. I can find the area of a circle from the radius and diameter. We know we need the radius though, so if you are given the diameter, just divide it by 2, and then you will have the radius.